All right, Wagji Khalsa, Wagji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the Modern Sikh. And I'm glad you guys are here today. Of course, I got Jaspreet with me. Jaspreet, Guru Fateh, what's going on?
ਵਾਹ- ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. And I know you wanted to talk about this. And so today's topic, we're going to talk about the Nishan Sahib. What does it mean? It's in the news lately. It's everywhere. People like it, hate it, in the community, out of the community. There's so much going on. So we want to just talk about the Nishan Sahib, what it means for Sikhs, what happened January 26th, and everything in between. So just breathe. Share your initial thoughts on Nishan Sahib and why you think it's an important topic for us to talk about today.
Oh, like this is supposed to be a podcast for deliberating Sikh issues and discussing things that are very important for us in the contemporary in the lens of, tradition, Gurbani and Tawarikh and Rahat as well. And it seems like right now we've kind of hit this fork in the road when metal meets the road, in which we're having discourse about something that we have long thought everybody understood about the Nishan Sahib, but apparently when it comes to practice, we all seem to have deliberations about what it means when we're actually hoisting it. And so I think it's very important for us to discuss this as a way to strengthen the community, because deliberation is important, but deliberation is with the intent of unity. And so we should be united on this front. And so I wanted to discuss this mainly from that angle.
So let's discuss, before we get into what the Nishan Sahib is, what happened that's making us talk about this. So discuss what happened January 26th at the Red Fort. It was all over the place. The good, bad, and ugly of it.
So there are a few aspects of it. There's obviously the state narrative, which is trying to label the Nishan Sahib as a Khalistani or extremist propaganda, trying to label it as, somehow that day the entire movement was taken over by some malicious force. And then there's the true intent of the community, of the protesters. And today we're going to mainly focus on that, is what was the intent, what is the angle of the Sikhs, because it's a Sikh insignia for the humanity, right? And we're going to talk about the dimensions of it from that perspective. But before we continue into that conversation, I think it's worth mentioning that there were two incidents that happened on the 26th, right? So on the 26th was the protest that took place through Delhi, that was originally demarcated with Delhi police, and whatever events took place causing them to go off route, they went off route, and they ended up at Red Fort. There are videos that have been played over and over again in Godi Media's lens of showing violence perpetrated by the farmers or the protesters. And it's worth mentioning that they're only showing very specific videos. But before we continue, I want to say that any violence by any organizer, anybody that's in any leadership position, has openly condemned any acts of violence. But the movement is the largest protest in the world, and so isolated incidents of violence are going to happen. It's inevitable. It's almost uncontrollable at that point, because there's just a sheer number of people that are involved, the number of actors involved, as well as, seeing your peers and loved ones pass away next to you when you've been sitting on the streets for over 80 days and then being brutalized over and over again by the police and provoked. That causes some reactions. I'm not saying any of that justifies it, but that's the lens through which to see that part of it. The second part of it is the Nishan Sahib itself being hoisted. It's worth mentioning and worth reiterating over and over again that the Tiranga, or the flag of India, was never taken down at any place, but the Sikh Nishan Sahib was put up with the Kisan Union flag, the Kisan Rally flag, at a empty flagpole which was hoisted up by a galvanized force of everybody that was at Lal Killa or Red Fort.
Thanks for clarifying that, because I don't think a lot of people know, because the way the media shows it is that other flags were taken down, the Nishan Sahib was the highest is there, and that's going to be the law of the land. This is going to be, they're trying to make this new Khalistan, and I know Khalistan triggers a bunch of things in people. Khalistan, forget non-Sikhs, just Sikhs alone, it probably triggers things. So I'm glad you clarified that. And, the Sikh Research Institute came out with something that shows what is the Nishan Sahib. They came out with graphics, and they show, the insignia that's on it, the kanda that's on it. They break it down and show what does this all mean. So just bear with me. I want to read this. It's going to take about 30, 40 seconds. But this is basically what the kanda means and the Nishan Sahib means. So first, before I read it, the Nishan Sahib is about the Sikh worldview. And the Sikh worldview, in short, is Ikko Onkar. And Ikko Onkar, that podcast could go on for 27 hours, so we won't get into that. But just think of that when you're thinking of Nishan Sahib. But let me just read this. The Kanda emblem adorns Nishan Sahib, the Sikh flag, and captures the Sikh worldview. The design of the Kanda incorporates 4 weapons that were used in Sikh history. In Sikhi, a balanced life involves harmony of the outer life, called Miri, which is political sovereignty, and the inner life, which is called Piri, spiritual sovereignty. So Miri and Piri are represented by the 2 swords on the outer edges of the design. The double-edged sword in the center is called a Kanda, and that represents the passage one takes through life as illustrated by the 10 gurus. The circular disc known as the Chakra represents the all-embracing, all-encompassing nature of Ikko Onkar. Like I said, you just got to know what Ikko Onkar is in the Sikh worldview, and then you'll know the flag. So taken as a whole, the Kanda represents the creative, sovereign power of Ikko Onkar, the force that governs the universe in its entirety. And that's what the Kanda represents, and that's what the Sikh flag represents, and that's why you basically see Nishan Sahib at every Gurdwara. And it's nothing to do with Khalistan, nothing to do with any of that stuff. But because we've been using this for a long time, before the word Khalistan was even in people's memory or whatever was etched, the Kanda was used, the Nishan Sahib was used. So that's what it really means. So I really want to get that out there, because a lot of Sikhs do not know this. A lot of Sikhs don't know where the Kanda comes from. Why do we have this? Why is it in Gurdwaras? And one thing I want to say is, why do we have it? Why is the Kanda there at the Gurdwara? And it was explained to me, I was listening to a speech, and they said it really well, which is, it's like going, because over there, it's all about the Guru's rule. It's not about your rule. It's what we call Gurmat. It's all about the Guru's rule. The sovereignty of Ikko Onkar and the Guru's rule will take place at that location, which mainly is Gurdwaras. So people are like, why even have it? It's just like, the way that you relate it to is when you go to any other country and you go to an American embassy, the America flag is there. Because in that embassy, the American rules work, not the country that you're in. It's kind of the same concept of why the Nishan Sahibs at Gurdwaras. But Jaspreet, so let's talk about, so now we just gave like a little overview of what the Kanda is and what it means, so people don't have that misconception, because Gaudiya media will never tell you these things. And largely the biased Sikh media won't either. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about why it's created such a hangama.
So again, you said it beautifully. It talks about sovereignty, and sovereignty for Sikhs isn't a nation state. It can be that, because nation states, what do? They allow us the ability to govern. But for Sikhs, governing spaces don't necessarily mean having a formal country. Governance for us means policy. Governance means a way of life. And there's a shabad that comes to mind that explains this very well. It's Begumpura Shahar Ko Now. And it's actually written by one of the Bhagats. And Bhagat Ji there explains that it's a place where fair taxation takes place, where people's creeds or their origins are not demarcating of how they have to live or what they have to do, that people are free in that space. So call it Khalistan, call it Begumpura, call it Halle Miraj, whatever term it works for you. But sovereign rule is the aim for Sikhs for the ability for liberating people from any ties they might have or any oppression they might face. And this is celebrated even throughout the farmers' protest. The same police officers that were beating these people under the Nishan Sahib were the ones getting fed by the farmers that were bruised and berated. They were the ones serving them langar, preparing food for these people and having them sit down and feeding them. And so that's policy. That's how policy works. Policy is how people are ruled, people are governed, people think, their frameworks. So all of that took place under the Nishan Sahib. That's an example of the Nishan Sahib in a modern context, right? Is where the shield, like, okay, so when I was learning Shastra Vidya, when I was growing up, I was learning Gatka, and one of my ustads once told me that, go pick up a talwar, and I was just a little kid, and I was like, what's a talwar? And he was like, it's a kirpan. I was like, why does it have two names if it's the same thing? And he said, in Urdu, talwar means aiming or striking at someone's neck. Tali tevar. It's made of two words, right? And it was a way of saying one strike to kill a person, to brutalize someone. And the gurus changed that. Same weapon, but it changed it to kirpan. It means with the blessing, a blessed shield. And that's how we look at a kirpan. That's why every Amritari Singh wears a kirpan. And so even on the insignia, when we see it from an angle of mercy. We see it from an angle of a shield. We see it from an angle of protection. And so even at that moment, we're protecting these officers who feel like they have no other choice but to brutalize these people in order to obtain job security, right? Like, if these people didn't have an incentive to brutalize these folks, would they? And I think that's a critical angle. So who's to blame here? Is it the system or is it the police officers? I personally think it's the system that's to blame here. And so when it becomes a conversation about the Nishan Sahib, it's them trying to refocus the attention of the people, refocus the narrative to a propaganda machine that would rather focus on a few frustrated people who have seen their loved ones die, rather than the months of brutality and unjust laws that have been passed that they're trying to repeal. Because Godi media and the people that follow Hindutva, Indian nationalism, they are focusing on everything except for the laws. You'll never hear the narrative of, these people have been sitting out here for so many days. They've been deprived of fresh water, as we saw a few days ago. That's not the lens that they're going to talk about. In fact, Modi has even said now that he's not even going to speak to these farmers anymore, and avidly is just avoiding the situation and letting these people starve to death, and trying to isolate them and trying to slowly kill them and put them even further in debt. So when the conversations about this sovereignty, when the conversations about the insignia of the true sovereign, Akal Purkh, or the one force that you mentioned earlier, then the flavor is different, because that same flag historically has been used for protecting Hindu women when people came from outside of India to take them into sex trafficking or slave trade back to the city of Gajni. The same insignia was used for langar since 1469, since Guru Nanak Maharaj. That same insignia is used by Khalsa Aid, who gives humanitarian aid across the world even today. That insignia is also used for our Gurdwara. And today, we're seeing it in this farmer protest. That same insignia is used for teaching Dalit children education, giving them an education, giving them books, giving them food, giving them clothing. If anything, the people of Delhi are more happy seeing the farmers and the Sikhs come into their city because they've seen a rise from oppression under the governance and the policy making of the Sikhs than they ever did under the regime of Modi. So exactly what part of this sounds like terrorist practices? What part of this seems like extremist movement? That's the puzzling part to me. Is sure, there's a symbol, but that symbol has so many connotations to it. Why just pick one?
I agree with mostly everything you said. I don't know if it was used in 1469 when Guru Nanak. I think I know what you meant. It was used back in the day, but I don't think everyone knows like the origin of it. I think that's still a thing that Sikhs have to figure out, and the years have to figure out because Banda Singh Bahadur's book, he had and there's a famous painting of him, carrying the insignia and everything, but they didn't have it back in his time either. So, anyways, that's as much as I've read that they didn't have it back. He actually had Deg Deg Fateh on it, which kind of means the worldview of Sikhs is the same there too. But that's what at least Jagjit Singh says in his book. Um, okay, so I got you on that. I'm agreeing with you on those types of things too. But so let me, because I talked to my neighbor about it, and my neighbor, he's all, of course, he's from Haryana, his family's from Haryana, and Sikh and everything like that. But so he's always writing about farmers' protests and everything, and we talk, and he knows people there, so he gives me some inside scoops here and there. The thing is, so let's go back to what happened January 26th. The flag was up there, which is causing this whole hoopla. And I was like, and he's like, Manpreet, he's like, of course you're Sikh, so you're biased. You're like, oh, what's the big deal? The flag's there. But he's like, you got to understand, not all the farmers are Sikhs. They're in different religions as well. So why are you promoting that? Why did you put it up there? It leaves a bad taste. You're trying to unify everybody. So why even have that flag? And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. I'm not saying it was great, but we could be like, yeah, it's not a big deal. But when it comes to unifying everybody and leaving religion out of it, because right now the religion is farming and their land. That's the one religion everybody's under. Why even do that? And that's what left a bad taste. What do you say about that?
Look, historically, the flag of the Sikhs has been used as a cosmopolitan flag. It's not the Sikh flag. That's just how we easily, conveniently label it, which it might be even our problem on the marketing standpoint. The Sikhs have openly accepted everybody. Look at Maharaja Ranjit Singh's court. People were literally tripping over one another from other countries that wanted to come and serve under him as generals or scholars or poets. Look at the 52 court poets of Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj. They weren't all Sikhs, but they all came to fight under his insignia. And by the way, here's my clarity. In 1469, we might not have a Nishan Sahib per se, but the ideas of the emblem itself, the insignia itself, was already immortalized with the manifestation of Guru Nanak Maharaj. Because many people argue about what the Nishan Sahib is. Some people say it's a katar, it's a tal, it's a kripan, and it's blue instead of orange. That doesn't matter. The thing that's constant with the insignia of the Sikhs is what it represents. And everything else kind of becomes a smaller issue because you can show it however you want to. You can manifest it however you want to. And during Maharaja Ranjit Singh's time, there are pictures and depictions of the Khalsa flag, quote unquote, the Sikh flag, being flown side by side with a flag with Durga on it. And so things for Sikhs coexist. We're not one identity. It's not just saying like it has to be our way or the other way. Same thing happened on the day of the Red Fort. There were 3 flags. The Tiranga was already up, so the Indian flag was already up in the air, and it was the biggest one, and it was on the same flagpole it was on before they arrived. Then the Sikh flag was put on another pole, on a different flagpole, and on that same flagpole, the farmers' flag was put up. And so the job of the Sikh flag is not to be like the Sikhs have been here. The flag of the Sikhs showing up is that humanity has arrived, and righteousness itself will protect the dignity of the people that are downtrodden. That's what the flag represents. The flag has done that over the years, whether we've had a nation state or not. Look, that flag was used in before 1947 as well, where over 93% of the people that sacrificed their lives for the independence of India were Sikhs. But even back then, they used this Nishan Sahib. In World War II, the Sikhs fighting under the British had the Sikh flag on their regiments. Even today, in the Indian Army, the Sikhs use the Nishan Sahib while they're protecting the borders of India from Pakistan and China. So when we use it in so many contexts, and they openly allow it, and they see it, and there's even pictures with Modi with the Nishan Sahib on his forehead. So when we have all of these connotations that, and in which the insignia is used for the protection of people, of Rakhi, of those that are downtrodden or that can't protect themselves, and Sikhs over and over again sacrificing themselves for that righteousness, for that dignity, for the values. Why is it now that suddenly those values are in jeopardy because now you're on the wrong side of history? Now you're the ones that are being the oppressors, and we have to fight against your oppression.
That's what happens. That's what happens all the time. Kind of remind me of the movie I saw too, Kesari, where they used the Nishan Sahib, and I was actually surprised. I'm like, they're using a Nishan Sahib in a Bollywood movie? That's crazy, but it was made by a Sikh director, but it was just, I was like, wow, all right, cool. This came through too. But no one said a word there. So let's talk about also what's happening within the Sikhs. So let's talk about Sikhs now. Let's talk about why are some Sikhs divided on this issue and forget about that they don't know what it really means. Okay, that's of course, because then you're definitely going to be divided. But is there anything else? Is there anything else that's dividing them on the Sikh flag, using it, where to use it, where not to use it, invoking it at certain places or not?
Absolutely. And my personal belief on this, and the things that I've learned over the years, just listening and talking to people, and even our literature, is that the Sikhs have developed a victim mentality in which a lot of us fall, because we also have to see the ramifications of speaking as sovereigns, whether that's 1947, whether that's Operation Black Thunder in the 50s, whether that's 1984. Anytime Sikhs have tried to exercise sovereignty, exercise any form of protecting the weak, we have met a very blunt end of injustice over time. And so a lot of Sikhs are fearful of 84 repeating itself today. One of the main reasons that people are speaking up so loudly is not just because the farmer laws are so bad, but it's also mainly about the human rights abuses that we are fearing that are going to take place as a result of the Indian government trying to control this narrative and spin it. And so that victim mentality is what's leading people away from the Nishan Sahib, not the Nishan Sahib itself. Because if you take away all the smokes and mirrors, we all agree what the Nishan Sahib means. We just can't accept the truth of what it means, because we get very uncomfortable very quickly and say, what will happen to us if people misconstrue this? What will happen to our community if we portray ourselves in a way that we show any type of individuality? And look, the problem is that we have mistaken individuality and unity, actually, as uniformity, that somehow we can't show our colors, or somehow we have broken away from other people. Look, we have to take inspiration from nature. We have to take inspiration from the world as Sikhs, because we see divinity in all. Then at that point, we need to look at the divinity of a rainbow. We need to be able to see that a rainbow has different colors, but they all move together. And every single color serves a purpose. Whether that's a person from Rajasthan, UP, Hindu, Muslim, Dalit, Brahmin, doesn't matter. It never has. For the Sikhs, it's always been that if whatever you are, as long as you're fighting for righteousness, irrespective of it, for us, you're a brother. For us, you're a sister. For us, you are an ally. For us, you're someone that we welcome with open arms. And even if you don't agree with us, we still want to accept you with open arms. And that's, if we want to exemplify that in the modern context, just look at Khalsa Aid's work. Look at the Kisan Morcha. Look at the Gurdwaras. Look at how they're still feeding police officers. Look at how they're still treating Dalit Sikhs or untouchables across India. Look at how we're still educating them, feeding them, clothing them, helping their shops. All of that is done through Sikh principle, and none of that means that we're just being religious. Religious and secular for us, as you open with Miri and Piri, religious and secular for us are intertwined. And so when that's the case, then why are we not able to properly put that into words? Why are we not willing to take the time and say, this is what we are, and we are unapologetic about it? Because there's no reason for us to be apologetic. We're trying to help the world. Let us. In a world where we're so shattered and we're so divided, when there's a sign of unity, why flinch?
Yeah, I like what you said about victimhood, but listening to you, it reminds me of my conversations with Sikhs these days. They want, I don't know why. I don't know why or where this happened. And it's kind of like a sign of our community too. We just want to be, we're peaceful and that's it. And you should just, we're in this new trend where everyone just wants to pray and do 24-hour kirtans all the time and not talk about issues and not protest or not be with the protest, not give their dasvand, which is a whole nother topic, a whole nother show. But I think that's a weird trend that's happening in our community of Sikhs, where when I talk to them, they don't want to talk about politics. They think politics and Sikhi is totally separate. I'm like, I'm like, what? I'm like, like a double take. Like, it's not separate. It's the same thing. Like you said, intertwined. Like it goes hand in hand. That's why there's media and PD on this. Like, people just need to know, man. Sometimes like, could you just read what it is? So, but it is a new trend. I don't know if it's going to go away. I don't know where it's heading, but most people want politics and Sikhi, two separate things that have nothing to do with each other. This is how Sikhs are thinking. And it boggles my mind. I'm like, because I grew up in a family where it was always together, So it was just, it's a dangerous path. I said that last podcast too, on meat and stuff, but I'm like, this is a dangerous path too, because you mentioned Khalsa Aid. Khalsa Aid is both. Khalsa Aid is just not spirituality, guys. Khalsa Aid goes where the political oppression is happening and helping people, and that's what Khalsa should do. That's why India probably is afraid of the word Khalsa still, which is another show for another day. But you're right that the victimhood is happening. We're not telling our own narrative. We shy away from our own story, and we just want to tell the government story. We want to tell the story that's popular, the story that won't make anybody uncomfortable, because God forbid somebody's uncomfortable for 5 seconds these days. So, and we got to stop doing that. We got to tell our own story, our own narrative, and we got to make people, Guru Nanak and the Gurus made people uncomfortable. That's why they are where they are. That's why Sikh personalities are so great, because they were uncomfortable and they changed, and then they made you uncomfortable and they changed the world and they changed Sikh perspective and stuff. So I agree, man, but I do see a trend that is heading the wrong direction of everybody wants to keep politics out of everything. Let's just talk about Bhat. Let's just talk about spirituality and let's eat, and then that's it.
So I'm going to kind of deviate from you in that there are two sections of the community that are forming. One is like strictly being like brutal, being unapologetic, being very, very orthodox, focusing on correct practice and correct tradition and correct belief. So orthopraxy is correct practice and orthodoxy is correct belief, right? And so people that you're seeing a reactionary thing that's taking place, and people are going to two different extremes. One is completely be spiritual, and the other is completely be active. And the thing is that all of that falls under the Nishan. All of it falls under the Nishan Sahib. But like people often have this conversation with me. They say like, "Oh, you don't like. Where do you find biras from?" I'm like, my biras comes from the conviction of my gurus. Like, I prepare myself for battle every single day, and that same battle is how I see the external world. That battle that's going on inside of me is how I see the external world. These are the same things taking place outside that are taking place in within. And the thing is, as a community, we have fallen into this double-mindedness that somehow one of them will stray us away from the other, the opposite. That if I open my eyes and start taking care of the world, that somehow I'm going to lose myself. and that if I start taking care of, if I stop taking care of the world outside of me, if I stop taking care of, like, the political battle that's taking place outside of me, or the actions like Chatka, or the Hazuri Singhs running and calling Halla or Holla Mahalla, that if those things go away, that somehow I'm going to lose Sikhi. So those are the two dimensions, right? That's how we see the community. The thing is, the gurus intertwined both of those. We just need to come back to not untethering them. They're all under the Nishan, see them as one, understand them as one, interact with them as one. The battle for the Sikhs, we don't see the kalam any different than the sword. And that's why we're seeing this problem with, the first 5 gurus were peaceful and the last 5 were violent. That's why that's taking place, is because we don't understand, for the Sikh, the kalam is just as powerful, just as compassionate, just as righteous as picking up a kirpan. That's why the Shabad by Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj comes to mind, where he says that if all other means of resolving conflict do not find solution, then it is righteous and just to pick up a kirpan, pick up a shamshir. Like, that's why it exists. That's why it's there. And unfortunately, the reason that I personally believe that we have fallen into this idea of, one side or the other, is because we have never understood the complexity of our Sikh leaders. We talk about Mani Singh from one of two perspectives, but never two at the same time. Yes, he did write a lot of Bida. Yes, he did do a lot of part. Yes, he did tutor people. But at the same time, at the age of 75, he did pick up a khanda and go to fight for the sanctity of Darbar Sahib. Yes, he did write. Yes, he did pick up a sword. For us, it's one and the same, because that's what it means at the end of the day for a Sikh, to rise up at the moment that we need to speak up. Surah soh pehchaniye jo lade deen ke het. Purja purja kat mare kabu na shade khet. Yes, it's literal. Yes, it's metaphorical. For us, meanings don't exist in separate spaces. Things can coexist for Sikhs. Like, so many meanings to these shabads can be valid. It's just we, for some reason, want a single meaning for every shabad, a single instance for everything to exist. And that's where the problem lies. We argue about meanings because we don't understand that all of those things can coincide, and they can all be true exactly at the same time as one another.
I mean, you're so good at giving these lines from history and Gurbani. I only have Punjabi music lines that run through my head all day. So it reminded me of Sartaj's line. Jit de nishan sada rahe jande chande naal, pehla var kalma na pichon var khande naal. Like, first, it's always the pen and what's happening. Okay, could we figure this out? If not, last resort, we'll pick up the khanda too, just like Bhai Mani Singh did. So you're right. I mean, look, the community needs to understand this. And it comes to education. When you were talking, I thought of Gurdwaras as well, because that is going to be our next podcast. Talk about Gurdwaras and how they're failing us, because I stopped going a while ago, but when I do go, because I'm forced into go for family reasons, where it's like, some family's longer or something like that, and just gotta like show up, or it's a tragedy, or a wedding. So it's either one of those things. But I've never heard the Paisab say, and this is, by the way, this is where most Sikhs get their education from. Still in America, don't worry about India or like what happened 50 years ago. Most Sikhs still get their education from this, where the Paisab is like, come to Gurdwara, matha deko, paat karo. There's no political, there's no activism, there is no nothing. So people just hear that. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to do this many Sukhmi Sapats, we're going to come here, do Asakivar and this and that, and just life is good. So, which is really hurting Sikhs. And if they actually, if they actually knew, I mean, we could have, we would be in a different place right now. But it's a process. Jaspreet, what else do you want to say about the Nishan Sahib, man?
So I'm going to say this. As much as Gurbani is important for Sikhs because we believe it's true wisdom, that wisdom can also be sought through music, through other lens, right? Through other mediums. And so you brought up Sartaj, and this is one of my favorite songs by Sartaj. And he says, ਇੱਥੇ ਸੜਕਾਂ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਸਵੇਰੇ ਘੁੰਮਦੇ ਨੇ, ਇੱਥੇ ਸਰਤਾਜ ਵਰਗੇ ਬਥੇਰੇ ਘੁੰਮਦੇ ਨੇ. That in the mornings and in the evenings, there are plenty of people that walk around touting about that, I stand for justice, I stand for peace, I stand for humanitarian values, I do so much activism. And then there's so many people that can sing about these things, that can sit back and be like, look at the glory of XYZ person. There's so many people that can do that. But then he says after that, ਸੱਚੇ ਸੁੱਚੇ ਅਹਿਸਾਸਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਰੰਗਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੰਗ ਜਾਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਆਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ. That people who are able to paint in the color of love others, to inspire others, to be able to speak out on behalf of those that are downtrodden, to help those that are downtrodden, to assist those that have less, and then get them to such a point where they are the ones doing the work. That transformative quality, that finding people like that is very hard. And coming back to the Nishan Sahib at this point of these lyrics, there's videos of Delhi police officers crying, saying, you can take our jobs if you want to, but we don't want to brutalize these people anymore. If that's taking place, I ask any viewer, especially if you're sympathetic to the Indian government, if that's what the Delhi police officers are saying and crying about, then I think we need to start questioning what we understand about this narrative, what we understand about this propaganda and this protest. And the line that hits me the most is the chorus of this song. And he says, ਜਦੋਂ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਸੀਨਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਛੇਕ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਜੀ ਉਦੋਂ ਜੰਗ ਜਾਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਆਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ. That when you know that there are going to be holes put inside of you, whether that's your credibility, whether that's your respect, whether you're going to be called terrorist, whether you're going to be called nasty names like Gurmukh Singh, who was behind bars even at the age of 70, when their credibility is challenged and called terrorists, and they're beaten and berated and called nasty names while their kids are on the battlefield. By the way, Gurmukh Singh served in the military for 30 years and in 3 wars. And he said, I will never be able to live down what just took place to me. And this is a 70-year-old man talking about his experience with the Delhi police and how he was brutalized. And this song, he says, ਜਦੋਂ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਸੀਨਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਛੇਕ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਜੀ ਉਦੋਂ ਜੰਗ ਜਾਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਆਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ. That those people are not your average Joes. Those are the most distinct, the most precious people in the world, because they are willing to put it all on the line, even if it's inconvenient for them, because they see that their vajud, their morals, their respect, everything that they hold to the foundation of themselves is being challenged. They're willing to throw everything else to the side, even if it's their lives. And so that's the true wisdom of Gurbani as well. And that's the beauty of Gurbani, because it's not just secular, and it's not just, Matha Tekya, we only find it all in Guru Granth Sahib Maharaj, nothing else in the world matters. For us, it's all divine wisdom. We can find wisdom in Tupac lyrics if we wanted to. But when that's the core of us, then imagine what our insignia can cover. What can the Sikh Nishan Sahib stand for? What can it represent? And so far it's represented humanity, humility, the ability to stand for those that are downtrodden, the ability to stand up for those that have less, and to empower them so that they don't even need us to be there anymore. They're able to protect themselves and become representatives of the insignia themselves. So then it's not even a Sikh issue. It's not even the Sikh flag anymore. It's a humanity flag. It's a flag for all of us. At the same time, it becomes a flag for all of mankind to stand together. And I don't even blame Hindu nationalists for not understanding this, because Hindutva's entire politics is based off of divide and conquer. It's all based off of trying to separate us. So when they see a flag of unity, they don't understand what that means, because their understanding of unity is either you're with us or against us, and it has to look a certain way or else it doesn't count. For us, it's like, Jeda viranga ajo, just join us, we'll fit you in, we'll find a place for you, and even if we can't, don't worry, we still have your back. That's the Sikh way. That's the Sikh principle that unified from the house of Guru Nanak. And I think we need to start understanding that, not just as Sikhs, but even outsiders, because the Nishan Sahib is just as much mine as it is yours at the end of the day.
Very well said, man. I just encourage everybody to go read about the Nishan Sahib, go read about some Sikh history, and start mixing your politics and your spirituality together, and then you'll get the idea of Ikonkar, and you'll get the idea of the Nishan Sahib as well. Jaspreet, man, it was great talking to you.
Sorry, I just ranted a lot. I know I kind of just went on my own tangent and just acted like you didn't exist for a while there. But I think that this issue is so critical, not just for the Sikhs, but for the world to understand, because today is a battle of Punjab, but tomorrow the battle might be in the US or in Canada or somewhere around the world, and the Sikhs will still stand up. And I think that we need to start not only educating ourselves, but educating the populace about what this insignia means, because tomorrow it will be used again by the Sikhs to stand up for whatever cause it is in the world, as it has been historically.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's a great way to end it. I think everyone should just go and realize what this insignia really means. I just hope they do. I hope we could encourage a few people, but I hope the community could come together and start really looking at Sikhi the way the Nishan Sahib is telling us it should be, instead of um, my instead of being cafeteria Sikhs, picking and choosing what you like, and don't worry about the rest. So hopefully this gives some clarity to everybody, what the Nishan Sahib is, what the Sikh flag is, what it really represents, and why it's for everybody and humanity. It's not ours, like Jaspreet said, it's everybody's. But Jaspreet, man, always great talking to you. I'm glad we had this conversation, and I look forward to the next podcast. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.